I know in 2012 this was a very hot topic at that time, and there was different views, but is this the same kind of argument or the same kind of approach or the issues that we faced in 2012, or is this particularly different from what we saw then?
It is similar to 2012. If anything, the position today is more serious, and the case for deregulation today is even stronger now than in 2012. For a variety of reasons. I think the price of crude oil is somewhere around $45 and will probably stay in that region, 45 to 50 or 55 thereafter. I'm among those who believe that the crude oil market has changed almost forever with the advent of shale producers. The revenue profile of the nation is a lot worse today than it was in 2012. And the other argument, if you remember in 2012, that people called me in 2012 and said, you know, we won't mind going through this adjustment if only the government itself will take some pain. Well, if this government has shown that they're willing to take some pain themselves, from the president, the vice president, and all that stuff. So if you won't do it with this government, then I don't know when you'll ever do it. But having said that, I think I should make it very clear because there's some confusion. I like the word deregulation because that is what I favor. Deregulation exists in aviation fuel. Deregulation exists in diesel. Petrol is the problem, and kerosene.
What do we have in those cases?
I'm confused myself because people use different words. They talk about deregulation and then they announce a price or a maximum price and so on. For aviation fuel, nobody announces a price. For diesel, there's no price announced by anybody. It's between willing buyer, willing seller, supply and demand. So those products are trading at a price that is consistent with what is happening in neighboring countries and also the world market price. Petrol, we've had this fixation in Nigeria, and it's not caused by this government or the past one. It's gone on for decades. A government does not promise you the price of anything, not the price of rice, not the price of gari, not the price of housing, but they want to promise you the price of petrol. What is the point of promising only one item? And then the unions too somehow are fixated with the price of only one item, almost as if they have been brainwashed by what happened 20 years ago, 25 years ago. Now I think it's important that as a nation we're facing a crisis, that we forget about partisan differences and pull together. And I'm happy to see that one or two unions, the ones that are a bit more progressive, have made it clear that they favor deregulation. We have to free this economy from the burden of this distortion called petrol subsidy once and forever. And let me explain one thing. It is deregulation, in my mind, cannot coexist with price fixing by government. If government wants to fix the price, NNPC, who also sell petrol, should announce their own price for their own petrol and leave others to bring in petrol and sell it at their own price. So NNPC can be a reference price. But I don't like this idea of deregulating and you announce a price, a maximum price for all, because you do not control the dynamics. You don't know where the price of crude oil will be tomorrow, the exchange rates and so on. So I think it's for NNPC as one supplier in the market to announce what its current price is and leave the rest of us to talk about deregulation.
Mr. Sorry,
yeah.
I'm coming here. I don't know if a lawyer, Mr. Falana, came up to talk about the fact that the Petroleum Act, if this is a deregulation, this would be going contrary to the Petroleum Act. Maybe, is it not possible that that's why the NNPC insists, or the Minister of State insists, that this is not a deregulation, but a new pricing?
Okay, listen, I'm not here to discuss law. It's not my area of competence. I'm an economist. Yes. I'm looking at it as a federal government that has a mandate. And they have a firm mandate. They control a political party that controls most of the state governments. You control the Senate, you control the House of Rep. If with that broad mandate, you cannot take actions like deregulation, who will take it tomorrow? Bear in mind that in 2012, it was a House divided. Even before the president announced deregulation, House of Rep, the speaker was going in a different direction. They met on a Sunday, said the president should stop, and so on. Here we have a government that is a bit more, has a broader mandate, is still early in its tenure, has some goodwill. So if you cannot harness that and pull all the elements together to deregulate, then I don't know if and when, and also plus realizing the poor revenue profile. I think in April, which was last month, I'm told central bank receipts in foreign currency were as low as something like $600 million. Petrol imports alone can consume over half that. So are we going to be a nation that consumes half a foreign exchange on one item?
Nigeria economy, we were told, was doing well. Some say pretty well. Some others argued otherwise. Whereas, like technically, which was also used by the finance minister in explaining or qualifying the budget, stood out prominently. So, if we were in recession or not, was the big question. While that was still on, it snapped. The federal government finally came up clear and loud too. Nigeria's economy is in recession. It needed to be looked into for many to understand it, the consequences and solutions or ways to get us out of it.
I have with me the Minister of Finance, Mrs. Kemi Adeosun. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily.
Morning.
Well, I'm sure you've seen the dailies now. I mean, everyone's going on about the economy. This day has this. Saraki, Senate's mandate this session is economy, economy, economy. If you had to face the National Assembly, because I assume that when they resume, they will definitely be calling on the ministers to talk about the economy. You did brief them just before the Senate went on recess. What would you be telling them has changed since your last discussion with them?
Right. Good morning, firstly. I think that the biggest change, of course, has been that then we were anticipating that we would move officially into recession. I think that was where I first said that technically I think we're in recession, and that was later confirmed by the NBS statistics. Now, we had been in negative growth really since 2012. There'd been a slowdown, and we were hoping that we would avoid recession, but we're there now. What does that mean in terms of our tactical plans? Our plans were always the same, and our plans haven't changed. That is, we need to stimulate this economy, and we're going to do so largely by redirecting expenditure from recurrent into capital, because we believe that capital expenditure will create jobs and will create more productivity in the economy in the long run and help us to diversify. So my message will be nothing has changed in terms of strategy and plan. Clearly, we need to look at other scenarios, and when we did our planning, we did, the best case scenario, the most likely scenario, and the worst case scenario. So we had planned that, look, if this happens, we will have to change our funding mix, and that's really what we're looking at now with asset realizations, as well as to supplement the money that we can raise in debt. But the overall strategy, the overall solution to the Nigerian problem hasn't changed. That is, we've got to make this economy more productive, we've got to create more jobs, and to do so, we've got to invest in our capital infrastructure.
There were talks about, the executive arm of government sending an executive bill talking about president's emergency powers to help, drag out the economy from a recession. Are you privy to that bill?
Well, I'm not privy to the bill, but I'm privy to the thinking behind it. And what I would say is that there are a number of bottlenecks that we have already identified that we think, given where we are, it might be worth looking at how we unlock them. And let me give an example. We've pumped fairly large amounts of capital into the economy through various ministries, departments and agencies, some of whom have deployed it very quickly and are ready for more. And we're about to release another tranche of 350 billion. In fact, we concluded that meeting yesterday to allocate that money. But there are some ministries that have been slowed down, mired in the procurement processes. Now, it's about transparency versus speed. We want transparency, we want open tenders, because that gives us the best price, and that's what also gives opportunities to Nigerians to bid for and to get government contracts. But if it's taking 12 weeks, 16 weeks to get through the bureaucracy, at this point in time we feel we can't afford those delays, so we need to maybe look and say, look, procurement laws were made for usual times, these are unusual times, can we consider temporarily relaxing some of the conditions? And similarly, there's a transaction that we're all working on at the moment, which is a very pivotal transaction with General Electric, GE, that they want to run freight on our old rail system, which would create huge numbers of jobs across the country. But it's bogged down in rules that say you've got to do this, and then you've got to advertise and keep it open for a year. We don't have that time. So there are some areas where I think it would be useful to have some legislative amendment.
Over the weekend, we did hear the CBN governor talk about how the worst of the recession is over. Do you buy that?
I do, to the extent that, in terms of we've had problems with oil price, and then just when we thought that things couldn't get any worse, we started having problems in the Niger Delta. So we now have problems with oil quantity. It's very difficult to see what else can go wrong. So almost our worst case scenario in terms of our planning has already happened. I think that's probably what he was trying to say. That from now on, the only way really is up. The only way really is recovery. The only way really is forward. You know, when we started, you do these scenarios and you say, well, what can go wrong? If you look at where we are now, everything. The oil price is low, the oil quantity is low, we're in recession.
You don't think that the oil prices can get any lower? I mean, when you look at what we did know that, you know, there were very, very conservative figures in terms of the benchmark that was projected for oil prices. But then you're looking at 2.2 million barrels per day. We understood that at some point we were doing just about 1 million, or half of that. And yet we say that it cannot get any worse. What did
the oil price? I don't think the oil price has bottomed out. If you look at the oil price, it's global, okay, and it's driven by global factors. And indeed, speaking of the oil price, that's one of the things I think when we look back and say, how did we get here? That's one of the signals I think we missed. In 2010, when the oil price was 110, the Americans did something very significant. They allowed exploration onshore, fracking, and created the shale oil industry. At that point, they were producing 5.2 million barrels of oil a day in America, and they were the biggest buyer of oil in the world. They signaled to the world, we're not going to buy oil anymore. We are going to become self-sufficient.
I'm quite sure we've given you that moment to really recall some of those happenings of 2016 on Sunrise Daily. We'll be back shortly.